Hi, this is Ken Adams, and this is a special edition of the Valley View, where we've been interviewing the various city council candidates. And joining me today is Sheronne Blasi.
Correct.
Okay. Your
Very
name
good.
was up there at
Very
the top
good.
of the ones that I was having trouble pronouncing.
Very good.
So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
And
Thank
you're
you
a
for having me.
candidate for the 2nd District, and you have 2 candidates running against you. So there's always a possibility of a runoff.
That is correct.
You probably don't want to hear about doing another election, but...
That is correct.
Okay. And so I've been talking to the various candidates, and we try to limit the topics. And one of the lead questions I always ask is about the 3rd bridge, because there's a lot of discussion in the community. And I did a show a few months ago talking about the 3rd bridge, and I got lots of people, lots of feedback at the dog park and other places where I go about the show, because a lot of people want to try to understand these issues. So why don't you talk about what your position is and how you feel about it.
Well, the 3rd bridge is definitely it's a very hot topic for this campaign in this election. And I think one of the things that's unique in our ward, in Ward 2, is I think we have differing viewpoints on the 3rd bridge. And so where I'm coming from is I've served on the Planning Commission. I've served on Salem City Council in 2012 when I was appointed. And so I've had some firsthand experience with looking at the studies and engaging in the conversations, and also knowing really where our transportation challenges are, and also where our remaining land that we can still develop in Salem. And so the way that I am looking at the possibility of a 3rd bridge is I believe that we do need to address our transportation challenges. We currently have kind of a logjam downtown, and there's been lots of discussions about how we can alleviate that. And I know that the city has done some work, but we also know that Salem is going to continue to grow. It's going to develop further, and a lot of that development is going to occur in West Salem. We are projected to grow by between 50 and 60,000 in the next 15 years. And so that development, that growth, again, will most likely occur in West Salem. It also will occur in South Salem. So as traffic converges in the downtown area to try to get across, we have some transportation challenges there. And there's been a lot of discussion about, well, can we fix the on-ramps? But my understanding is that it's not just an on-ramp and off-ramp issue. It's a capacity issue for the bridge. It's also, we have challenges whenever we have to close a bridge, because when we close a bridge, we are limited to one-way traffic. So an additional bridge, as has been discussed by the committee that's been studying this, and also by the Department of Transportation, is that we would need additional capacity. So I am in support of a 3rd bridge, but I would preface that with it needs to be the right 3rd bridge. I am not in favor of a bridge that we can't afford. I'm not in favor of asking taxpayers to pay a toll. I'm not in favor of something that we literally cannot afford. The other concern I have with regards to our current situation with the capacity is when people sit in their car and they're waiting to get across the bridge, or trying to get across the bridge, or they're stuck in traffic, and it takes anywhere from 10 minutes to 20 minutes to 30 minutes. I'm concerned about the emissions that come out of the cars, that come out of the trucks, as those vehicles sit there waiting to get across, or, so it's in the morning, it's in the afternoon. So I'm really concerned about how much impact we're having on the environment as those cars continue to sit there. The other concern I have is, again, having served on City Council for a brief amount of time and going out and talking to folks about what they think about the bridge, a lot of the feedback I got, and I understand that people are very, very much divided on this issue. So some people absolutely hate it. Some people keep asking, when is it going to happen? But one of the things that concerned me is that businesses and commuters are impacted on a daily basis. So I heard from several businesses that they literally have to realign their day. They have to schedule their day around the bridge, around the peak. I don't know if you'd even call it rush hour, but that they have to. I don't know if Salem has rush hour, but they have to work around. So if they're making deliveries or they're going to see clients on either side of the bridge, that they have to work around that. So that's concerning to me, that we are potentially limiting businesses. We're also limiting, I think, on some level, just people's ability to function every day. I met a woman when I was canvassing literally last weekend. The topic of the bridge came up, and she said she was so upset because she tried to go from this side of the bridge, from South Salem, over to West Salem so that she could attend her son's high school band recital, band concert at West Salem High School. And she missed it because she was stuck trying to get across the bridge.
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems to me that like you have two bottlenecks, one in the morning around 8 and another one at 5.
Right.
And the one at 5 seems to be worse, frankly.
Right.
But like when I first moved here, I was substituting out at various schools in the Dallas areas and like that. And having moved here from California, believe me, I never even considered it traffic, frankly.
Right.
It was something that would last a while, but it wasn't a big deal. And one of the things, though, that I've wondered about is the fact that they could have like commuter buses going back and forth who would help alleviate some of that traffic problem, at least for people that live in West Salem, say, and work in downtown Salem.
Certainly, yes. And I think that would be a fantastic idea for lots of reasons.
Right. And so I see that as helping to alleviate the situation. The other thing that, in the studies that I've seen, that West Salem and Polk County have increased in population over the last 10, 15 years, and they haven't seen an increase really in traffic. And part of that is due to the recession, and I think it's also due to the fact that people are starting to realize that cheap energy isn't available like it used to be. So they're starting to look at combining trips, you know, instead of making a bunch of trips back and forth, combining them, and doing other things so that they don't necessarily have to use their car all the time. And see, I guess the way I look at it too is that we need to be building infrastructure that looks ahead.
Right.
And if cheap energy goes away, you've built a bridge that maybe isn't needed anymore, or is the traffic situation has been reduced because people are telecommuting, or whatever.
And those are all very key aspects of all of this, but I still think, based on what we expect our population growth to be and where we can build, that at some point we're going to have to address this. And you know, we have studied this in Salem for years and years and years and years.
Better part of 10 years.
Right. Oh, and I've heard from folks that they've been studying it since, you know, they moved here.
Right, but I mean, they've actually had a study going on for, I think, since 2006 or 2008, I can't recall.
Right. And again, I think that, and this is another issue, that we need to engage the public more in how we decide what we're going to do, you know. And I can say right now that I support the idea of a third bridge, but anything serving on city council has to be vetted through the public. And this will certainly be an issue that ultimately the public is going to decide when they vote to pass a bond measure, if it makes it that far.
Right.
If it goes that far, ultimately the public will weigh in. But I would hope that we would have a good sense of whether or not that will happen.
And we've had a good discussion beforehand.
Right. Yes. Exactly.
Okay.
So,
one of the other infrastructure issues that is coming up a lot is the police station and the civic center.
yes.
And there's talk about shifting it,
Right.
and there's groups in the city that want to see it moved out of, say, the downtown, where it could be built cheaper and maybe more convenient to other areas of the city, because we're at the west end of Salem, where we are at this current civic center, and with the police station there.
Right.
So, and like I know that I used to go by the police yard where the cars are usually parked for maintenance and things like that, which is over near 21st, I believe it is, in Mission. So, I mean, there's a lot of other options there. And plus there's a bunch of used car lots along Mission Street that might
there are.
Available
Right.
land.
Right.
So what is your view on the Civic Center police station
My
issue?
view on that is, and this is where I like to talk about lack of communications with citizens, and I'll certainly talk about the Civic Center and my thoughts on that. But the thing that I'm most concerned about this issue is I really think this is an issue, and again, it's going to be, it would require a bond measure for whatever we decide to do. But I think that the public does not feel as though they have been engaged in this discussion. What they have seen is they've seen city staff come to neighborhood associations or go to Ross Market with a poster board of what it's going to look like and where it's going to be. And I know there was some discussions years ago when the university students came up, and there was, they engaged in some conversations, but it was kind of put on the back burner. And now what's happened is the city has come out and they've said, here's our plan. And people are really, really feeling as though they haven't been included in the discussion. And so this is an area where I think we could try something like we did with Courthouse Square Task Force. I served on the task force for the remediation. And what Marion County did is they put together a citizens task force to look at the problem and come up with solutions. And so there was a wide range of citizen involvement on that task force. And that's something that I think could work well for this issue. I just feel as though people really are not feeling as though, just in general, but this is a very key issue. There's a lot of talk, but people really aren't feeling as though they're part of the decision-making process.
Yeah, and I've heard, okay, I haven't been able to go to city council meetings, but I've heard a lot of people say when they go to the city council meetings, it's almost like the decision's already been made. And, they'll allow citizens to speak, but it's almost, they get the feeling that the decision's already been made and that they're not then being listened to at that point. But I know that from past experience, quite often the meeting to go to is actually the Planning Commission, which usually gets these issues like about a month or so in advance of them showing up on the city council. So those are important meetings.
Correct. And I do serve on the Planning Commission.
Right. Well, that's one of the reasons why I brought it up, because I wanted to see if that
Right.
was accurate, at least here, because I used to be very active where I lived in California, but this is, I would assume it works the same way.
And it depends on if it's what comes before the Planning Commission is land use decisions. So zoning or just general land use most frequently. And so for the Planning Commission, we are very limited in
what you're going to cover.
What we're going to cover and how we can, we're certainly not allowed to discuss it because they're all quasi-judicial land use issues. So we are not allowed to discuss among ourselves or with anybody else because it then becomes ex parte communication, and that would put the city at risk of a lawsuit. So we can engage in conversations with city staff, but we have to make decisions regarding land use based on what is presented to us. I oftentimes will drive out to a site and I'll just take a look, so I at least know what I'm weighing in on. So yes, there are some things that come before the Planning Commission first, but those are fairly limited. And again, we have to make decisions based on whether it's state or city code. As it relates to a land use issue. So it's a zoning, does it meet the zoning requirements? So if someone is requesting a zoning change, we have to evaluate it based on the criteria that's very clear. So there is a little bit of that, but with regards to the Civic Center, that's a discussion that should be happening out in the public, with the community. That shouldn't get to the city council without have engaged in those conversations.
Well, it's interesting. When I worked, quite often I do training. And one of the things I'd always allow for at the beginning of the training meeting was a chance for people to, I called it my vent time. Yeah. Because a lot of people come in, they have a lot of other issues that they want to get out. And until they get those out, nobody listens. And that, I think,
that's a good point.
Yeah, and I think that happens even in public meetings. That there's other subjects there other than one that's on the agenda, And sometimes that needs to come out a little bit before people will start listening to the discussion. Plus,
Exactly.
people want to get their point across about
Right.
the third bridge or
Right.
or the relocation possibly of the police station.
Right. Well, and I think one thing that we could do a little differently, and I learned this the hard way when I served on city council in 2012, was I didn't know enough. I was just, I was figuring it all out, and I think I did a decent job of representing, my community. I brought forth issues that they were concerned about. But one thing I think city councilors specifically can do better, and that I know that I would do differently, is engage the public more outside of city council. City council, it starts at 6:30. Everybody's praying it will be over by 9:30, and there is there's a 20-page agenda, and it goes like this. And what needs to happen though is there needs to be more engagement, more discussion outside of city council. And we, as city councilors, we go to neighborhood association meetings, but those are oftentimes a city councilor will give an update. But there are a lot of other ways to engage your community. And serving on the city council, you're going to represent your ward and your community, but you're going to be making decisions that impact the entire city. And so we need to do a better job of engaging outside of council meetings.
Yeah, and as regards to neighborhood meetings, quite often you have retired folks like myself in substantial numbers. But like what you generally don't have are the younger couples with kids.
Correct.
And those are important to them.
Correct.
But they're not being reached because they can't do it at those times a lot of times.
That's a big challenge. That's
and
exactly.
And sometimes college kids who aren't aware of things, but they might be settling here.
Right.
They might have been drawn by the university.
Yeah, and I know we've had lots of discussions with the city about how can we let people know about these? How can we make them interesting enough that they want to come and and be a part of it? And it's really, again, going back to communicating with citizens. I think that the city needs to really step up its use, I hate to say this, step up its use of social media to let people know what's going on. The neighborhood associations took a big hit 2 years ago in 2012 when they lost some of their communications money. But they were also relying on a mailer.
Yeah.
And you're talking about folks just out of college.
Right.
Recycling. If I don't see it on my phone, if we don't see it on
but my
our phone.
daughter's a perfect example of that. I mean, she lived with us for about 6 months, and she's 25, and she'll look at her mail briefly, and a lot of the stuff she doesn't.
Right, goes
really
in the
read.
recycling.
Yeah.
But if you see it, and that's not going to reach everyone, but there are so many people now that are relying on that, and the city isn't there. We have a really nice website, but we don't do any postings. The city police, they post. They have a really great Facebook network, and so they post things a couple times a day. They post pictures, from 1893 of downtown Salem, but they also post anything that's happening.
Closing Court Street to do a movie during rush hour. But anyway.
But that brought in money.
Yeah, okay. But I mean, one of the things, though, that came up recently is the downtown parking situation. And my take on it, watching from the outside, was that the city council, like you were saying, announced a policy change where they were going to start charging for parking downtown. And the downtown businesses reacted by going out and getting a petition going to keep what they call free parking.
Right.
And when they got all these signatures, and this is my view, the city council kind of panicked and said, okay, and took the initiative just the way it was written, without any kind of, I don't want to say they did this on purpose, but I think sometimes there's a part of me that says they took it that way to kind of punish the downtown businesses, rather than point out better ways it could work.
Right.
And that kind of disturbed me, because it kind of leads into what you were talking about not having real good discussions and jumping in on things that maybe needed a little bit more thought. And I think the downtown business would have been amenable to some of the changes that might have been necessary, because I think they have a bigger problem now. I'll go
I
down.
would agree.
I'll go down through downtown around 8:30 sometimes, and all the parking places are already taken up.
Right.
And that, to me, is a very serious situation,
Right.
because it doesn't improve during the day.
No, not at all. And you have to drive around and wait, or go to the the free parking structure that I think we all forget about, and
Well, yeah,
and
of
then
course.
walk in the rain. So
But I have a friend who's disabled, so he doesn't want to walk
Right.
long distances, and usually he can't find a
Right.
parking place close to where he needs to go.
Right.
I mean, they have them on certain blocks, but that's not always where
Right.
he needs to go.
Right.
So he's kind of quit going downtown for anything.
Right. I thought it was funny you meant when you first started talking about this, you said there's been an issue lately with the
Well, I
with
think
the
it's.
parking.
I think
with the
since
parking. And
it's-
this has been going on for a few years, and
Well-
and part of me wants to say, it's parking. It's not
Yeah.
rocket science. Let's figure it out. Let's fix it. But it has to be done in such a way that we find a balance for business owners, for the city who does rely on revenue from downtown parking on some level, whether it's writing tickets or putting in meters. But I agree 100% that it was very, I would say, reactionary, whether it was intentional or not. My understanding is part of the reaction was they needed to make a decision before it went to the voters, because had the voters weighed in and said, yes, we want free parking on an initiative, then the city wouldn't have been able to make any adjustments. They
But
would
they
have had to
don't-
gone back to the
But I've
voters.
heard conversations about the fact that they don't want to do anything until so-called downtown businesses get their act together, is kind of what I'm hearing. And so they're waiting, but I think they should be going out to the community and say,
Right.
what are your problems, and,
Right.
and how can we adjust this to make it work
Right.
better?
Right. I agree, because I think it is having an impact. And I work near the downtown area, and well, I'm in the downtown area across from the Capitol, but it's a conversation that comes up a lot in my office with regards to the parking. And a lot of folks say, I'm just tired of I don't want to deal with it anymore. I'm going to go out to Kaiser Station. I can drive out there. I know I don't have to drive around. I don't have to deal with it. I can just go out there and do my shopping. And that's incredibly unfortunate,
Yeah.
that we as community leaders can't figure out how to make this work. And I agree 100% that it needs to be a discussion with the businesses, with people who want to shop and work downtown. What's the best fix? And it doesn't have to be. It doesn't all have to look exactly alike. It's not. I don't know that we wouldn't necessarily need to put parking meters everywhere or make it all free, or we can figure out a balance that works for the downtown community.
One of the things that kind of affects the district you would be representing if you're elected is the North Campus situation.
Right.
And I know there's some discussion around the neighborhoods about
Right.
what they'd like to see. So maybe
Yes.
you could tell us what your view is on the North
Certainly.
Campus.
That's an area that is near and dear to my heart for two reasons. The first house I bought in Salem was on 21st Street, literally just blocks away from the state hospital. And so that was where the first place that I lived in Salem and walked my dog. And I also work for a state agency that has used those ball fields for years and years and years to play softball. I also, as a state auditor who does capital construction performance audits, I audited the construction of the new state hospital. And so I spent 6 months a couple years ago on both sides of the street there, doing a performance audit related to capital construction. And so to me, this is, I definitely am keeping my eye on what's happening and engaging in conversations about what's going on. Having done several capital construction audits and knowing what the challenges are with that property, I applaud the neighborhood association for stepping in, bringing this to the public's attention, forcing the city to get involved, forcing their legislators to get involved because they have been trying to address this issue. When they heard that DAS was going out with with an RFP or an RFQ, they realized that they weren't ready for that. That property was not ready for that, and their fear was that if somebody purchased it that really wasn't ready to develop it because it needs work in order to be developed, that a fence would go up around it. So even for years and years, there would be a fence around it.
It would be almost like a dead zone.
It would look like Courthouse Square. It would look like the School for the Blind. It would have a fence around it. So they got involved. They brought this to the public's attention, and I think they've done a phenomenal job because they have forced a stop of a sale on a piece of property that's not ready for development. It is, and DAS was instructed by the legislature to sell it. It's a big piece of property, but the property wasn't ready. So, moving forward, they're going to have to make a decision, and I want the neighborhood association to continue to be involved. If I'm elected as a city councilor who represents that area, I would very, very much stay involved in that discussion and making sure that DAS or the state doesn't suddenly move too quickly, go out again they literally were going to go from an RFQ, which is just, request for qualifications. They didn't have anybody that was qualified. They were ready to move to a request for proposals, which made absolutely no sense. So.
Okay.
I could go on and on about that one.
Well, we have a little bit of time left, not very much, but
Sure.
One of the subjects got brought up at Salem City Club was public transportation on the weekends.
Right.
And also about bike and pedestrian
Right.
safety and skateboard safety. So we only have a couple of minutes
Okay.
left, and I'm sorry that we
That's
couldn't
okay.
get to some other topics.
No, that's
but,
okay.
So what is your view on public transportation on the weekends? I feel that we need more.
Well, I think it's dismal. It's had an impact on business. It's had an impact on employees. People not being able. I have literally heard of people that say that they have lost their jobs because they have relied on public transportation. They don't have cars. They take the bus, and the bus service was discontinued. That it kind of made sense during the recession. It makes no sense now. We need to make it a priority, and I think that the county and the transit district and all of us were very focused on repairing Courthouse Square, getting that back up, getting the bus mall ready. So it's time to address the public transportation issue. Figuring out a way to restore bus service on the weekends. It needs to be a priority. It needs to be a priority by the county. It needs to be a priority of the transit district and the city, and coming up with a solution, working together, having those conversations, working collaboratively to come up with a way to fix it.
Well, I'm sorry that's all the time we have today, and I want to thank you for watching this special edition of the Valley View with our guest today of Sheronne Blasi.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you.
And come back next week and we'll have another episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.